Welcome back. I hope everybody has a cup of coffee. Yes, no? No? It's after lunch, the food starts kicking in, and then he starts feeling sleepy. Okay, hope the session will keep you awake. We're going to look at building Windows Phone applications. So we started the morning, we took a holistic view of the phone ecosystem, some of the capabilities, some of the new features. Then we looked at designing the applications, right? And we saw how we can apply the data binding, the themes, etc. Now let's look at the actual application itself and what we need to take care. So in this module, we are going to cover the page navigation, how we move from one page to another, how we pass information from one page to the other, how do you provide context to your application. So as I mentioned earlier, we do not have navigation, right? We do not have scroll bars, we do not have menu bars. So if you want to apply some kind of menu to your application, how do you do that? And we talk about that in the app bar section. We talk about page orientation changes, localization, and how you can use the Windows Phone Toolkit to add page transitions to your application. So when you talk about page navigation, right, the top level container for your application is the frame, right? It's a frame object. And that sort of holds everything together. Inside that, you have what you call the page object, right? And the page object holds individual controls within the page. So in here, we have the page and then the individual controls within the page. And the page sits in the frame object. So if you want to navigate from one page to the other, you use the navigation service class, right, to move from one page to the other. So use the navigate method on the navigation service, provide it a URI to the page, and you indicate whether it's, what kind of reference are you applying. Is it relative to where you are? It's an absolute path you're providing, right? And then you provide some means of navigating from this page to the other page. So it could be a button, it could be a hyperlink, it could be from your app bar. And then the page transitions to the second page. Now keep in mind, each page is stateless. So when you move from the first page to the second page, the content of the first page is going to vanish. When you come to the new page, second page, it's going to be created from scratch. If you want to move back to the first page, you can use the go back service. Now, if you take this analogous to Internet Explorer, you have the back button on Internet Explorer, right? And that keeps a history of the pages that you have visited. Similarly, the navigation service has a history of the pages you have navigated. So as you move from one page to the other, it builds up the stack and it allows you to go back into that history. So if I say go back, it knows I have come from page 1 and it's going to take me back to page 1. So in case I move from main page to the second page and the second page to the third page, if on the third page I said go back, it will take me to the second page. If on the second page I said go back, it will take me to the first page. And if I go back, then I close the application, right? And as I mentioned in the morning, you have the hardware key that allows you that go back functionality. You do not need to implement anything specific. It's by design. There are situations where you may want to override the back key. And what are those situations? So, think of this scenario. You have a page, right? And on the page, you opened a panel, right? Like a pop-up control. So when the user presses the back button, he would want, or he would expect the panel to disappear, right? He would not expect you to move from the page to the previous page. Following me? Or have I lost you? So you have a page, and in the page you created like a pop-up or a panel which is overlapping your page, and the user presses the back button on the phone. The expected behavior would be that the panel goes out, but the panel is not a page, it's a control on the page. So the default behavior of the back button would be close this page, take me to the previous page. But that's not what you want. So what you could do is you can use the cancel option within the arguments that are provided to you on the method, override that and say I do not want to cancel. And then in code you can close the panel and provide the required behavior.
This is on the application level or page level?
This is on the page level.
Page level.
Yes. What if I want to pass data between pages? Right? So the way you would do that is using the same navigation service. You bundle the payload with the arguments. So you create an argument string like you would do in a web page, right? And pass those arguments to the second page. And the second page, you have something called the onNavigated to. You override that page or override that method, and in that you look at the query string that has been passed, extract that out, and do the proper handling. Right? So in this case, you want to pass the object from one page to the other, right? But instead of doing that, what you could do is you could tie that object to the app class itself. So it's a global object, and I'm just passing a reference to the object. So in our case, if you see here, I want to pass the selected item. I want to pass the selected item to the second page. Rather than taking the whole selected item as is, I can just take the ID, right, and pass it to the second page. On the second page, since it's a global object, right, it will retrieve it from that global object and bind it to my page. I will show you in code. Okay, I'll show you in the demo. How do you handle nonlinear page handling? So till now we saw a navigation that was very linear. We went from page 1 to page 2, page 2 to page 3, and then we went back. But what if your application is kind of a, let's say, newspaper application where people could move between pages? There's no linear movement of the pages, right? The guidelines are that if a user moves to the home page and clicks the back button, then you should close the application. If you do not incorporate this, then the chances of your application failing are there. Okay, your application can fail certification. So in this case, we went from the main page to the second page, from the second page to the third page, and from the third page directly to the main page. Now if I click the back key on this page, what is the experience? No. That's what you expect it to do. But in the navigation history, what is the back page? The third page. Right? So when I click the back button here, the expected behavior for me would be to close the application. But in code, it's going to take me back to the third page. And what you could do is, you could use the navigation service .remove back entry to remove the entries that you don't want. Okay? So you need, when you're moving from, if you have a navigation hierarchy like this, then you need to pass to the page where you are coming from.
When I remove the back entry, it will go back to page 2?
So if I remove the back entry, if I say remove back entry, it's going to point to page 2. If I have 2 back entries, then it's going to point to page 1. Okay, and then if the user presses the back, he's going to go out of the application. So you need to build that logic in your application, okay, and see where you are coming from. So for example, you could be on the main page from the second page. In that case, you don't need to do anything, right? But if you're coming from the third page, then you need to indicate to the main page you're coming from the third page, and then you need to do some logic to remove the back history. Okay? So if you see here, we remove the back entries so that when the user presses the back button, we are out of the application. And here if you see, we are passing the URI. It says home from third is equal to true. So I know if I'm checking in code is home from third, then I have to remove so many back entries to go back to the home page. We run the Contoso cookbook. I have the list of regions. I click on any one of those regions. It takes me to the recipe page, right? I click the back button, it takes me to the main page. I click the back button, it takes me out of the application. So in code, I have the main page. And then I have that selection change on the list box, right? So in here, I'm checking if the selection item is not null, then I need to move to the detail page. And then in here, I am providing the unique ID of that item as part of my page URI. If I go to the group detail page, I have the unnavigated too, okay, and in here I am looking for the group name and binding that to the group. So I am doing a find group by that group name. So if you see here, I said you can take that object and you can put it into the app class, so it's globally available. Right now, the recipes object is part of the app class. Right? So I do not have to instantiate it, it's already there, and I just use the find group by name method of that object, pass the group name, and it will bring me the group, and then I am binding the data on the pivot. If I am being passed a unique ID, then I use that unique ID to find the group and map it to the data context. Right? But over here, nowhere I have the logic to put back the page from current state to the previous page. It's by default, it's part of the hardware. Okay? So if you, let me show you the app class also. So the app class is your starting point. Right? This is where you inherit the application object. It's analogous to your main in Windows forms or console applications, and the global.asx in web applications. Right? So if you compare this to the global.asx, all the events that are loaded in the page history are in the global.asx, right? Similarly, all the events that are happening are in the app class. So whenever we load an application, when we close the application, all of these are in here. And we'll talk about this in the next session. We talk about application lifecycle management. But this is what I wanted to show you is I have a recipe object and I'm creating a new recipe data source and adding it to the recipe object, right? And that is defined as a static object here. So now the recipes is part of the app class, so I don't have to move objects back and forth in the page navigation. I just provided an ID and I'm good with it. Now let's talk about the app bar and how we can add context to our application. So by default, when you have the application, right, you have something called the system tray, right? Where is the system tray in the phone? It's on the top, right? It shows you the battery life, the network connectivity, and all that comes into the system tray. You may want to hide the system tray, right? Because your application may want more real estate. It may want to have the full UI of the application of the screen. So you can hide the system tray by saying is visible is equal to false. So use the Microsoft Phone shell namespace and set the system tray visibility to false. Also, you have something called the application bar or app bar as it's called. And you can invoke that app bar at the bottom of the page and provide icons and menu options for your user to provide some actions. So for example, you are on a data entry screen, you want to provide option for adding a new record, deleting a record, updating a record. You usually do that in the app bar. You have 4 buttons. You don't have to use all 4. Right? So if you need 2, you use 2, you need 3, you use 3. Maximum you can go is 4. And then you have the menu items, and we'll talk about that. Right? So here we have 3 icons on the app bar, and if you see here I have the 3 ellipses. When I click on them, I get the menu. So in addition to the icons, I can have additional menus that provide me more actions. So if you see here, this is a standard app bar. I'm defining the app bar. It's part of the application bar class. I'm defining the buttons. So I have 2 buttons here. One is called the new contact and the other is called the search. I provided images. Now the guidelines are that you provide white images on a transparent background. You could use colored images, but then if you change the theme, they may interfere with your UI. If you use a white with a transparent background, then the system is going to take care of the theming automatically. Clear? And then I have the menu item. Here it's different from the icons. Here I am generating new data and I am clearing the menu items. So it does not have to be the same thing, it can be different. And each one of them has an event handler that is called whenever you click that item. Now if you move the phone into a landscape position, if you see here, the extra space that you get on the phone is used by the app bar. So the app bar then, instead of going at the bottom, right, moves to the side. Now if you see here, the content, right, was not filling up the screen estate, right? It was less than because we had the app bar in here. In this case, the content is filling the whole screen estate. And the reason is our app bar opacity is 1, right? So that way you can have the full screen and the app bar is going to superimpose on top of your screen. Now, if you go to blend, many of these icons are predefined in the blend application. So you can just go in there and say I want a new app bar, and you can add these icons and they will be part of the app bar. Clear? Right? This is enabled and the text is about, and then I have an event handler. So I can initially have the menu item disabled also. Clear? And underneath this, I can even have the menu items. So this is the menu item, and then you have the okay, this one does not have the icons. But if I take this solution to blend, I can come to the app bar. Sorry. So I'm on the wrong page. So in here I can add an application bar icon, or I can add a menu item, right? So if I say add application bar icon button, it adds me a button, and then I can select the one that I want to display. So let's say if this is a download button. There you go. So from blend, I can add the application icon button, right? And I can also provide the resource for the image. So if I look at XAML now, I have the application bar. Initially I had the menu items, right? Now I have the application bar icon button, and I have the icon URI set for download.png, and then I can add an event handler that's going to navigate to when I click that button. Clear? And if I run this, let's close this. So if I click on the app bar, I have the about and I have the button. I click on the button, it's going to fire an event handler if I attach an event handler. Clear? So let's move on. So let's talk about the different orientations that we have within the application. Now, if you saw in the morning in the emulator, we had the option to change the orientation to check the different orientation that we have. Now, from an application point of view, not all applications need to cater to the change in orientations. There are some applications which will be in landscape. They don't make sense in portrait. There are some applications which make sense in portrait but do not make sense in landscape. Right? And there are applications which can cater to both. So if your application can cater to any particular orientation, then you should handle both the orientations or stick to one orientation. And the way you do that is in the supported orientations in the page, you provide the orientation that you would like to cater to. So you could say portrait, landscape, or portrait or landscape. Right? You have those three options. So you have portrait, portrait or landscape, and then you have landscape, as I said. And this is going to fire an event. So whenever the orientation changes, an event is going to be fired, right? And then you have to, in your code, change the orientation of your UI to cater to that orientation change. So if you see here, we have the portrait, we have unaltered portrait, and layout optimized for landscape. Right? Now, how do you do that? It's not very difficult. So in here, in our case, if you see, I have the grid which has 2 columns and 4 rows, right? In the first one I'm saying star, the second one I'm saying auto, right? So here I have got 2 rows, but the second column, sorry, I have got 2 columns. The second column is not visible, right? Now what happens is, in the second, when I change the orientation, right, it's the same layout, but since I have space here, the text moves to the right, and I have a proper layout. So here, this is the first column, this is the second column. So what I have done, I have just moved the description from the second row to the second column, and the orientation is much better. See here, we can move elements. So I can set the text property to the row property 1, or I can set it to 2 and column 0, right? So this, yeah. This one? Yeah. It's unused. So this is our first row, right? Sorry, this is the first row. This is the first row. This is the second row. This is the third row. This is part of the pivot table header. This is the pivot control. So this is row 0. This is row 1. This is row 2, and this is row 3. But when they say the third row means this, row 2. So star, yeah, but there is no content here. There is no content here.
What's the difference between auto and star? Does auto resize the content?
So auto resizes to the content, and then the star will use the remaining space. But in here, there is no content, right? So it's sort of collapsed down. The content is in the 4th row.
So if we have to put the 3rd row to be auto instead of star, we get the same result.
Auto means arrange yourself to the width or height of the content. So it's collapsing, right? But if I put star, star would mean use the remainder of the space. It will not collapse. So let's say if I have this as auto, okay, and I have a third row as something, right? So if let's say this was much smaller, so instead of taking just this much space, if I had put star, it would have taken this much space. You get me? So auto means use the real estate of the content. So what we are doing here, if you see here, we are moving the content. So initially it was on the second row, right? First column, or third row, first column. We moved it to the second row, second column. So in code, when we change the orientation, we actually use the API to set it to the second row, third row, first column. Okay. So supporting multiple screen resolutions. As I told you in the morning, we have 3 different resolutions that we support. We have the 800 by 480, which is WVGA. We have WXGA, which is 1280 by 768. And then we have the 720p, which is 1280 by 720. Now the difference between these two is the first one is a bit wider and small. The second one is a bit taller. So in here you get more real estate on the bottom. If you compare the two, you get more real estate at the bottom. In terms of scale, right? The scale factor for WXGA is 1.6. The 720 is 1.5. So it's 80 pixels taller than the smaller, the other one. And these are the scaled resolutions. So in terms of actual pixels, it's 53 pixels more. So in terms of devices, I think the HTC is supporting the 720p, the Nokia is supporting the WXGA. Yeah.
So all the devices must be one.
They'll be one of the 3, right? I think the previous phones, the 7.5 phones were WVGA, right? The newer ones are WXGA and 720p. The HTC is 720p. And the WXGA is, the Nokia is, so if you go to the phone, yeah, it's in the About tab. So this one is 768 by 1280, right? The HTC is 720p, okay? So if you go to the About, it's going to tell you what the resolution of the device is. So if you want to check the resolution before buying, you can do that. So now going back to that grid, we can use the grid containers or the layout containers to arrange our UI to fit the screen resolution. So for example, if here you set the height to auto to adjust the size of the content, and then you set the height to star to take up the rest of the this available space that is there. So if you see here, the image is sized at 270p. This is star, so it's taking up the rest of the space, and this is auto, so it's going to adjust itself to the content. So this answers your question, I hope. Right? So if you see here, this size is growing more than this because the resolution here is higher. So this is the difference between the auto and the star. Both of these are auto and both of them are the same size. But the difference comes here because there is more real estate, it's enlarging itself to allow more content. If I had set this to auto, what would happen? If I set this to auto, okay, probably you would run out of the screen because it would enlarge the container to have the whole content, okay. In terms of images, right, the recommendation is give the images in 1280 by 768 resolution, right, and we will scale it according to the resolution of the screen.
This is the smallest one?
So, come again? No, this is the highest, 1280 by 768, right, because the other one is smaller, that's 720. So, in terms of resolution, provide us WXGA, we will scale it to the appropriate size. Also, if you want, you can include images at each of the 3 resolutions. So, you can factor in the size, right, and we will take care when you are rendering the image for you. I don't know if this is still valid because from what I know the splash screen has been removed. There is no splash screen in 8.0 applications. In terms of application icons, these are the sizes: 100 by 100, 159 by 159, 336 by 336, and large is 691 by 336. Okay, so these are for your icons. So this is the application icon and this is the tile icons. For a small tile, this is the resolution. For a medium tile, this is the resolution, and this is for. And we'll talk about that if we have, right? We support 50 display languages, and you can go in and you can change your region in the region language and regions tab, right? We also support the RTL, so we have Arabic support, as I mentioned. So you can have your, you can even have your UI in native English, and then you can have controls going right to left. So whenever you create a new project in Visual Studio, you have something called Localized Settings. And if you see here, you have the Localized Strings.cs. And this provides you a way of localizing your content. So if you see here, you have the app resources, and depending upon the language that you use, you will have different resource files. So it will detect the culture of the language you have set. So I have not tried the Arabic, whether it moves the UI right to left or not. But we can try on the phone, it's there. So I have personally not tried.
When I'm developing an application,
yes.
I just have to put the string, the labels.
Yes.
And,
Yeah, you're talking about the application, you're talking about the phone.
No. I mean, the API of the phone will detect the culture of the phone automatically, and it will change the language.
Yes.
It will change.
It will change. So if you see here, you have the localized strings, and then you have the different resources, and you have the culture information. And you can add the different localized strings to the resources and then retrieve them from code. And then you can go and add additional language resources from the manifest itself. So you choose which languages you support for your application. And this is also important for certification, because you will need to tell them which languages you are going to support. Okay, so let's move on. You define the default language. So you have the default language, you define the default language, and then you define the supported languages. Okay. We have something called the Windows Phone Toolkit, which is available on Codeplex, and this provides you additional capabilities which were not shipped part of the phone, right? And of this is the page transitions and things like that, which are part of the phone toolkit. If you remember, I spoke about the long list selector, right? It used to be part of the phone toolkit. It's been moved into the toolbox controls itself. And it's free. Now they have used, so if you look at the Visual Studio 2012, they use the Nuget package installer, and allows you to very easily install new packages, update packages. It's a better mechanism to keep your code synced. So what are the controls? You've got context menu, part of the phone toolkit. So if you see here, it allows you context menu for your controls, right? Then you have date picker and time picker. You have the toggle switch. You have the wrap panel. You have the list picker, and many more. This used to be the same for the 7.5 also. So many of these controls that you see were already there with the 7.5 controls. Also, what you get is transitions between frames, right? So if you're going from one page to the other and you want to add an animation look, you can add the frame transitions to your page. So in here we are adding a transition frame to the root frame, right? So when it moves from one page to the other, you have this animation, right? And this is the code that you would put it as part of the toolkit. So let me go through the demos, okay?